repairing wall balls, we're going to need a couple things before we get into this. First thing we're going to do is we're going to clean the wall ball. So for that, a little bit of Goo-gone, some paper towels. The other things we're going to need for this project are the sewing awl. This is a Speedy Stitcher Sewing Awl. You can get this off Amazon for 20 bucks. You will not be able to do this project without this sewing awl. The other thing we're going to need is a pair of needle nose pliers, scissors. We have a Sharpie and a lighter. So we're going to start off cleaning this ball, and we use this duct tape method. You can see that after a while, the tape just becomes damaged. This ripped in the middle here, so this is just going to continue to get worse. I can put more tape on this and we'll hold it together. It's a bit of a Band-Aid solution, but I want to sort of stitch it together and actually fix the problem. So we take off the tape. You can see we got a nice rip here, and there's also this residue from the duct tape. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to clean that. Spray a little bit of Goo-gone on this guy. All right, so as you can see, we got the med ball cleaned up here. We got our sort of tear that we're trying to deal with. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take a Sharpie. I'm going to take the Sharpie and I'm going to mark out my stitching pattern that I want to do on each side. So what I like to do just to make life a little bit simpler is I basically give myself a line on each side, trying to go a little bit beyond it each way, making sure the line's about even. And then from there, you're going to give yourself your stitch marks. So what that looks like, we're going to basically sort of do these little marks where we're going to sort of punch through on this med ball and start stitching it together. So we have our stitch marks. We want it to be even on each side, approximately close enough. Okay. Now we're going to get into our sewing awl. So this thing comes together. It's basically one piece. Now what we're going to do is you unscrew the top. And you have two needles that you're going to be dealing with. We have a straight needle. Let's see if this works here. And then a curved needle. All right, so one's curved and one's straight. And we're actually going to start with the straight guy here. And we're going to put that into the top. You don't need to worry about threading anything. And you're going to screw on the top. Now what you're going to do is you're basically just going to puncture through this top layer, perforating the wall ball surface or perforating the med ball for where you're going to be stitching. It's going to be a lot easier if you do this in advance instead of trying to do it while you guys are stitching through. So starting at the end here, poking through. You don't need to go crazy here. So we're not trying to stab the med ball. You're just trying to break that top layer and give yourself sort of guide holes that you guys are going to be working with before we want to get into stitching this. And this will make it a lot easier in the next part. Okay, now we're going to take out the straight needle. And the other thing we're going to do here is we're going to get the thread set. So at the bottom of this guy has a little bit of cap. We're going to be pulling off that cap. It comes standard with the spool, and here this is like a nylon wax thread. You can use this stuff if you want. I have a black thread that I like to use for patching. It just makes it a little bit easier to see. We start with the thread here. You can see the awl. This awl thing has a little bit of like a thumbtack type guy in it, as well as a little bit of a hole. You're going to take a bunch of thread. You're going to feed it through the hole, right? You then come up. You're going to go around the thumbtack just to help give yourself a stop. The awl has a channel on it, so we're going to be trying to feed the thread through the channel, and then we're going to put the needle in and get the thread through the eyelet in the needle. And the big thing here is making sure that the bend or the curve in the needle is aligning with the channel in the awl. And this will make a little bit more sense if you guys actually have one that you're putting together and you're able to work. You want to leave yourself a decent amount of thread here. This is what you're going to be using a stitch. I think the rule of thumb is it should be maybe double the length of whatever you guys are actually trying to stitch on here. I always like to give myself a little bit of extra. That's not a bad idea. Now we're actually going to stitch this thing. When we stitch this, we're going to be going back and then forth, and that'll make a little more sense in a second. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find my first hole that I'm starting with here. I'm going through the med ball, and you're going to try to come out the other side where you guys punch that hole. Good, there we go. Now what happens is you guys are going to pull that needle out, and you're going to actually want to sort of separate that thread. And you can see that there's sort of the curved part of the needle that's happening here. as well as the flat part. And what I'm going to try to do, and this is where the needle nose pliers might come into a little bit of help.
Okay, so what we are trying to do here is we are essentially trying to create the thread that we're working with for the stitching process. So we're going to try to punch the sewing awl through the med ball, and at that point the thread is still tied through the eyelet of the needle. So after we have punched it through, we are going to be trying to separate that thread a little bit. So what you want to do is we're trying to take the back side of the needle here, or the thread on the back side of the needle, and basically pull that off the needle so that we have a continuous thread that we are working with for this process.
I guess you can leave this shorter and then pull it through on the other end if you want to, but basically what you have here, if you guys can see this, we have the needle through. The thread is just still going through the eyelet and it's coming out long on the other end. We're going to pull the thread back through. So you can see I have a thread through my hole going through both sides. I have a long tail here that I'm working with, and then I also have the side that's still in the awl. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to come back across. I'm going to come back across the opposite way. So I go into the second hole here. Left-handed, okay. And same thing, you're going to try to come out that second hole that you guys punctured before. I'm going to pull this first thread tight. You can see it made the stitch there. And what I'm going to do is the same thing. I'm going to try to pull this needle back a little bit and you get this little eyelet. I guess theoretically you can go through the front side. I have had bad luck with that where it seems to tie the knot early for me. So what you want to try to do is you want to get that back side of the needle, sort of opposite side of the curve. Pull out that little eyelet so you get a little bit of a loop on this back side. You're going to take this tail that you guys have here. You go through the loop, pull it tight, and pull the stitch back through. So now, if you did this correctly, you're going to end up with one line coming out of the awl and one line that's still in the med ball that you guys are sort of working with here. And at that point, you're just going to rinse, wash, and repeat that. So you're always going into the opposite side that you pull it out. So my second hole, I went in this side. Now I'm going to come back over, coming across the top, going into my third hole here, punctured through, come out the other side, find that hole. There it is. Okay, same thing. Coming out, make that loop. Make sure the loop is on the back side of the needle. You're going to take your thread here, go through the loop. Make sure not as clean. Pull tight, come back out through. Oh, okay, see, so this is what it looks like if you guys messed up. So this is a good sort of example here. I did something with this knot where I came through it the wrong way, and now you can see sort of I'm working with sort of a mess here.
If this happens to you, it's not a big deal. All you want to do is basically unthread it to give yourself a single thread. I think I actually take it back a stitch more than I need to here. All you're trying to do is take yourself back to that point where you have a single thread coming out one side of the med ball and a single thread coming out of the awl.
Same thing, I'm coming through the opposite side that went out, so I'm going back into hole number 3 here. Going back out the other side. I'm going to give myself that eyelet loop. Okay. Now what I want to try to do is I'm actually going to come across the back side of that to pull that knot away from the actual awl or the needle, whatever you guys want to call this thing. There we go. And then pull through and tight. So again, this is what it should look like. Strings on one side, awls on the other side, come back across. And, at this point, we're just going to do a little bit of time-lapse, guys. I'm just going to sort of keep running through this. It's going to be rinse, wash, and repeat, going into the opposite end that I already made. can see I basically have one string on either side here. You can give yourself one more loop if you want to. I don't know if you really need to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself a little more slack to basically tie this off. Now I basically have my two strings here. I'm going to just tie it off, make a knot. I do right over left, pull it down, just make a square knot, then you do left over right, pull it down. And now it's good and tight, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give myself, cut that short, cut that short, take your lighter here, melt the ends, just to singe the knot. This is a nylon thread. It'll just close off on itself. And as you guys can see, that is my sort of stitch there. That's my repaired wall ball. What I will say is this does create a little bit of a hard spot for your grip, so members might complain about that. But the positive is that this will not rip, so this hole will not continue to get bigger here. And that is it. Hope you guys enjoy. Again, Speedy Stitcher Awl here. This thing is awesome. It's a little bit of a leather stitching project, but you know, it came out good. And I think it's a pretty successful repair. It's much better than tape, which is a bit of a Band-Aid solution.